I just got this new shirt and you can't even see it, so that's a little disappointing, but look, it is an American Werewolf in London, and then the back is the coolest part. Let me see if I can show you. Can you see that? Can you see that? Anyway, not sponsored, but the shirt is from Cavity Colors. I'll link it down below. I love it. The American Werewolf in London. Okay, so let's talk about The Black Phone. I feel like this has been a very anticipated horror movie coming out for years almost, it feels like. I feel like we've all been like trying to prepare for this movie. It was actually postponed from January to June this year because of the positive screenings and the positive reactions to the screenings that they had earlier, which kind of came as a surprise to me, but we'll get to that. When I went to go see this a couple days ago, I went by myself and I had her scan the ticket and everything, and she asked for my ID for an R-rated movie. And it was funny because the other employee that was standing next to her had a big reaction, young guy. He's like, come on, she's clearly over 18. And I was like, clearly, but I just said I'll take the compliment, thank you, and gave her my ID. Anyway, so this movie is directed by Scott Derrickson, who also directed The Exorcism of Emily Rose, and of course his most famous movie, probably Sinister, which was deemed the scariest movie of the year up until recently, which Host has now taken over. And Sinister is a very disturbing movie. I think it is very effective horror-wise, so to say I was pretty excited is an understatement. However, not initially excited. I wasn't excited until I saw Scott Derrickson was actually directing it. The story is of course based on the short story by Joe Hill, and I am not the biggest fan of Joe Hill. We of course know him as Stephen King's son. I only read one of his books. I read Heart-Shaped Box and wasn't a huge fan of his storytelling. His writing was okay, but just I don't think he's the writer for me. And people have recommended his other stories to me, so I can't speak on all of them. Obviously, I did not read the short story for The Black Phone, or the one that The Black Phone was based on, so I'm not going to be referencing that at all, but when I saw that it was Joe Hill's story, I wasn't too excited just because my only experience with Joe Hill was not a positive one. But then I saw Scott Derrickson was the director, and I really loved Sinister. I loved The Exorcism of Emily Rose. I even enjoyed Doctor Strange, which, you know, is not really my genre, but I really liked the first one. So that got me a little bit more excited, and I saw the potential based on the trailer for The Black Phone of where it could go and like how much he could actually push the limits with this one. The Black Phone follows 13-year-old Finney, who is abducted by a mass killer and held in a basement. A disconnected phone on the wall begins to ring, and he realizes he's actually talking to the murderer's previous victims who are trying to help him escape. Like always, I will start with what I liked about this movie, general thoughts. I don't think I'm doing spoilers in this review. I don't think it's necessary. I do apologize if anything that I say is a technical spoiler, but I don't think it's going to reveal anything too much about the actual story. I'm not going to reveal anything about the ending or anything like that, but just, you know, an apology in advance if some of this spoils it a little bit, at least for the minor things. First thing I really enjoyed was Ethan Hawke as the grabber. I loved his voices. I really enjoyed how eccentric this character was, and I really enjoyed all of the scenes with the grabber. I wish there were more of them. I wish we got a little bit more backstory of the grabber, but we'll get to my criticisms of the movie in a second. Overall, I think the performances were actually really good. The child actors in this were phenomenal. Ethan Hawke was great in this role. I absolutely loved him. The score and cinematography felt very Scott Derrickson to me. It was very reminiscent of Sinister, and so if you're a fan of that kind of thing and the music in Sinister, you'd be a fan of the music in The Black Phone. I really loved the opening credits for this movie. I was into it. I was jamming. It was such a good beat. Definitely would listen to it just on my own time. With the cinematography, like I said, very classic Scott Derrickson. I feel like it's very beautiful. He definitely knows what to do with a camera, and that definitely comes across with the lighting and everything like that. The framing is gorgeous. So it was a very beautiful movie. It is set in 70s Denver, Colorado, which I really enjoyed the setting and the time period, although I have seen some criticisms that it felt a little bit forced, like the 70s aspects did feel a little forced, and I could see that at some points with like the soda cans. They really pushed 70s soda cans on you in this movie for some reason. Otherwise, that's basically where my enjoyment stopped with this movie. I'm not gonna say it was a bad movie, but you know, that being said, it wasn't necessarily a good movie either. I didn't love or hate this movie. There really isn't anything I feel very strongly about in a negative or a positive way, except for maybe the positives that I already listed. Those were the best parts of the movie. It really had nothing to do with the story or the storytelling or the movie itself. It was just visually, performances, things like that. And negatively, it wasn't anything that really stood out as being bad. Like nothing, I can't really criticize specific scenes or specific moments. Actually, that's a lie. I definitely can. But this is a movie that falls into what I like to call the horror graveyard, where horror movies go to die. And that sounds very harsh, but it is probably the worst spot you want to be in, at least in my mind, that a horror movie could fall in, where it's not phenomenal and it's not terrible. It's just kind of there, and it's not anything like stand out. Like nothing is really unique about it. Nothing really stands out as good or bad. It just kind of is. And the best example of this is The Conjuring Devil Made Me Do It. There's nothing really terrible about it and nothing great. It just is part of a franchise. And that's what The Black Phone felt like to me. And it goes in the horror graveyard. Just a very middle of the road place to be. And that is not a good place to be, I think, in my opinion, for a horror movie. I don't even think it's a movie that falls into a love or hate category. I don't think people are going to be hateful of this movie, like for instance, Malignant. That's my favorite example for a love-hate type of movie, and that one definitely does not fall in a horror graveyard. That is an extreme on both sides, positives and negatives, where people feel very strongly for it. I don't know if anyone feels really that strongly for The Black Phone on either side. I have seen a lot of positive responses to this movie online from people that I follow. I follow the director on social media, so that's probably another reason why I'm seeing a lot of these praises, because, you know, I think he's retweeting some things. And so I know a lot of people are going to get a positive experience out of it. I was just not one of them. It wasn't bad. I don't know. I just feel like most people are gonna feel kind of meh about it, you know? I don't think it's worth a theater experience, although I do fully support original horror movies in theaters, but you can kind of get the same experience watching it at home, in my opinion. So now let's get into the specific criticisms. Like I said, I didn't have anything. I definitely do. I definitely have some faults with this movie. For one, constantly waiting for something to happen. I feel like the first 30 to 40 minutes of buildup in this movie was very dull, and although there were moments that were very intense, there's some domestic abuse happening at home between father and daughter, and that was very intense. So, you know, if that's something that you're sensitive to, that it's very strong in this movie. And it does build up the relationship between the brother and the sister, which is great. But other than that, it didn't feel like the build-up really had a point. So as I was waiting for something to happen, constantly waiting, even after he gets abducted, and I'm still like waiting for something to happen. When something does happen, it's a cheap jump scare. Almost every single time it was a jump scare. And that does not sit well with me. I'm not always completely opposed to a jump scare, but when every single horror element in a movie basically comes from a jump scare, it's not for me. It almost felt like it used a cheap formula for a basic horror movie, in my opinion. Like very old school, every scare is a jump scare, every horror visual is a jump scare, and I am just not for that, especially because we know he brought us Sinister and things. Exorcism of Emily Rose was very original, very great. Very confused by this movie. The story itself does feel like one that was dragged out for a feature-length film because there wasn't enough in there. Like, we didn't get enough information about the grabber or why he is the way he is. This movie also got very repetitive for me. Like I said, the first 30 to 40 minutes is all build-up. We don't even see the grabber, really, in this first part of the movie. We see, like, a small scene and his van, but nothing really exciting happens up until, like, the 40-minute mark, I would say. And it's just, like, a lot of buildup of Finney just going to school. Like, he's just going to school, and then there's a fist fight. Going to school, there's a fist fight. I'm not sure why they put in so many fights between the kids. Like, I'm really not sure why there's so many scenes of people getting beat up in this movie, and it just kind of felt so repetitive after a while. I think they were trying to show, like, more brutality and more blood with, like, children being beaten up. I think that was probably the point, but it was just like too many times. Like, I just want him to be abducted already. Like, I know it's coming, so like, can we just get to that part? Because obviously the most interesting part of this movie is the grabber, is Ethan Hawke's character. So I want more scenes with him, and we hardly get any, to be honest. And then once he is abducted, it's just phone call after phone call after phone call, and that also gets repetitive. It's just like the grabber comes in, and then he leaves, and then there's a phone call, and it's just like on and on and on. And it just felt like two disjointed parts of a movie that were very repetitive in their own ways. I just think it did the same pattern too many times, and you knew what was coming every single time. There's also some inconsistencies with some of the details in it that I thought were very obvious. For instance, earlier in the day, on the day that he gets abducted, he is beaten up. So he gets punched and kicked in the face a bunch, and you see his injuries later at school, but as he's leaving school is when he gets abducted. And later that night, when he's in the basement, all his facial injuries are gone. It's magic. I don't know if I missed a part where time had elapsed, but I'm pretty sure it was the same day that he was thrown in there was the same day he got beat up. Like, I'm pretty sure it was the same day, and all of his injuries were just like gone. I think this movie is a very straightforward, casual watch. I don't think it's pushing the boundaries like Sinister did. There are some scenes that are like very difficult to watch, and you do feel very uncomfortable watching Ethan Hawke in his character and playing the grabber. There's a scene where he's like shirtless, and it's very bizarre, and it does make you uncomfy, but I just feel like it was too straightforward. I wanted more depth to the story. Like I said, it felt like a short story trying to be a full-length movie, and it was an opportunity for them to add some density in there and to like add some depth of character and things, especially for the grabber, because we didn't learn anything about him. I know nothing about why he is the way he is. Why does he wear a mask? Why does he insist on keeping the mask on and different variations on his face? I don't know. I just think we deserved more details about the grabber than what we got, and we just basically got fistfights and phone calls. That's how I would sum up this movie. Overall, I'm not that disappointed in this movie. Like I said, it wasn't like terrible. A lot of people are finding enjoyment out of it, which is great. I really do support the director and original horror movies, so I'm glad that it's doing well, but I am just left a little bit confused. I'm not like overly disappointed or anything, because like I said, Joe Hill's stories are just not really for me, but I did feel a lot of potential with this one, and a lot of it was kind of lost. I just think it's kind of a run-of-the-mill standard horror experience, and there's nothing necessarily wrong with that. It fits into the horror movies we've gotten so far. It fits right in, but it's just nothing unique, nothing like of a new experience, like some of the other horror movies that I've seen earlier this year. And I think some people will really enjoy it for what it is. Some people will just find it meh. I don't think anyone's gonna really hate this movie, but you'll probably fall into the category of like, it was fine, or you really like it. That's pretty much how I see like the reception of this movie going so far. So let me know what your thoughts are if you've seen this movie. Let me know down below. Did you love it, or was it okay for you? Or did you hate it? Make me eat my words. Did you hate this movie? Anyway, I would love to know your thoughts about The Black Phone. What is the next horror movie that you're excited about? Leave a comment down below. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye.